We live in a world that idolizes the word yes. From childhood, we are conditioned to believe that saying yes is polite, cooperative, admirable. We're praised for being agreeable, rewarded for compliance, and taught that harmony means never disappointing others. But this seemingly innocent habit of always saying yes carries a hidden cost, one so steep that it quietly robs people of their energy, their clarity, their time, and ultimately, their purpose. What most people don't realize is that every time you say yes to something that doesn't serve your spirit, you are simultaneously saying no to something else, often something essential. Every yes to someone else's needs can be a no to your own well-being. Every yes to fitting in can be a no to standing out. And every yes to distraction becomes a no to destiny. This invisible trade-off is rarely noticed in the moment. You say yes to helping out at work, even though you're already behind on your own goals. You say yes to attending events you don't care about, keeping connections that drain you, agreeing to roles that don't fulfill you, all in the name of being a good person. But what about being a good steward of your own life? What about protecting your own focus, your own vision? Saying yes is easy, it's comfortable, it keeps you liked, accepted, and unchallenged. But the truth is, nothing extraordinary was ever built on comfort. Growth begins where you draw the line between what you can carry and what you must release. People aren't exhausted because they're doing too little. They're exhausted because they're saying yes to too much of the wrong thing. Yes to overcommitting, yes to expectations, yes to responsibilities that don't even belong to them, and that constant yes becomes a slow erosion of self. You begin to lose touch with what excites you, what matters to you, what speaks to your inner calling. You start living for the noise instead of the signal. You don't notice it at first. It happens subtle, like a slow leak in your tires. One by one, your boundaries are crossed, one yes here, one compromise there. And before long, you've built a life that no longer feels like your own. The real tragedy is that we often say yes out of fear of missing out, fear of judgment, fear of being seen as selfish, but sacrifice is not the same as self-respect. There's a quiet strength in choosing yourself, not with arrogance, but with awareness. Every no you utter is not a rejection of others, but a sacred protection of your energy. And when you begin to say no to what drains you, the universe will respond by making room for what fuels you. There's also a psychological weight to being constantly available. It creates an expectation that you'll always be there, always willing, always accommodating. But the danger in being always accessible is that you become invisible. People stop valuing your time because you don't. They stop asking if you're okay because you've trained them to believe you're always fine. That pattern must be broken, not with anger, but with clarity. Saying no is not a confrontation, it's a declaration. It says, I value my time, I honor my energy, I choose what aligns with my vision. That kind of self-command is rare, but it's also magnetic. People may resist it at first, but in time, they respect it. The most successful, fulfilled people in this world are not those who say yes the most. They are the ones who have mastered the art of intentional no. They protect their mornings. They guard their mental space. They decline distractions. They know that time is a currency, and every yes is an investment. They don't throw their energy around like loose change. They make decisions like architects of their future, not servants of the present. And that's what separates reactive living from conscious creation. When you learn to pause before giving an answer, when you learn to ask yourself, does this serve me? Does this support who I am becoming? You begin to make decisions from vision, not pressure. You begin to act from alignment, not guilt. You stop outsourcing your power to people's opinions and start reclaiming your right to choose. Because at the end of the day, your yes means nothing unless you've learned how to say no. Your boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They don't block love, they block noise. They don't isolate you, they elevate you. Saying no doesn't make you difficult. It makes you deliberate. It makes your yes more powerful because it's coming from truth, not obligation. It teaches others how to treat you by showing them how you treat yourself, and the world always mirrors back what you model. If you're constantly overextending, the world will keep asking for more. But if you begin to draw the line and say, "This is what I choose, this is what I allow," then your life begins to shift, not all at once, but deeply, quietly, and irrevocably. You begin to notice less chaos, more calm, fewer distractions, more direction, and slowly, steadily, your life becomes a reflection of your values, not your fears. We've been taught to associate the word no with rejection, denial, or confrontation. Somewhere along the way, we internalized the belief that saying no makes us difficult, unkind, or selfish, but that belief is not only false, it's dangerous. It keeps people trapped in cycles of overextension, resentment, and silent suffering. The truth is, no is not an act of rebellion, it's an act of self-preservation. It's not a weapon of conflict, it's a tool of clarity. Saying no is not about pushing others away, it's about holding yourself close. When you say no to something, you're not declaring war, you're not breaking trust, you're not starting a fight. You are simply choosing to place a boundary where your peace begins. And peace is not something that comes from outside approval. It's something that is built moment by moment, through decisions that honor your energy and mental space. Boundaries are not walls meant to isolate you. They are filters designed to protect what's sacred to you. When you say no, you are choosing to create that filter. Most people misunderstand boundaries because they see them as offensive rather than protective. But setting a boundary doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself not to tolerate what drains you. It means you understand that your time is not infinite, your energy is not unlimited, and your well-being is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And when you finally begin to understand that, you stop apologizing for needing space, rest, clarity, or solitude. You stop bending yourself into versions of yourself that exist only to please others. One of the biggest shifts in personal transformation happens when you realize that your emotional safety matters just as much as anyone else's comfort. You are not obligated to accept invitations that feel heavy. You are not required to engage in conversations that deplete your spirit. You are not responsible for how others react to your boundaries. You are only responsible for honoring what you need in order to feel aligned, empowered, and alive. We often avoid saying no because we anticipate the reaction. We fear the discomfort it may cause, the awkward silence it might bring, or the disapproval that could follow. But here's the truth: discomfort is temporary, disrespect is permanent. If someone cannot handle your boundary, they were likely benefiting from your lack of one. And the moment you recognize that, you begin to see your no not as a disruption, but as a declaration that your well-being is non-negotiable. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of unlearning the guilt that's been embedded in us for putting ourselves first. It's about releasing the fear that your value is measured by how much you sacrifice. Real worth is not found in how much you give away, but in how well you protect what makes you whole. You begin to understand that when you keep giving parts of yourself to everything and everyone without limit, there's eventually nothing left for the things that truly matter. It's not selfish to say no to things that don't serve your growth. It's not rude to withdraw from energy that feels misaligned. It's not mean to step back from relationships that cross your boundaries. That is maturity, that is emotional intelligence, that is power, because it takes far more courage to set a boundary than it does to avoid a conversation. It takes strength to say no in a world that tells you you're supposed to say yes to everything. But only one of those choices leads to freedom. The word no also acts as a compass. It tells you where you are and where you refuse to go. It gives you direction. When you're unclear about what you don't want, you often drift into situations you never asked for. But the moment you get clear about your no, your yes becomes powerful. It becomes a tool for intention instead of obligation. You stop making decisions to be liked. You start making them to be aligned. No is the boundary that protects your purpose. When you learn to say it without flinching, you create space for opportunities that are truly yours. You begin to experience less emotional clutter and more mental clarity. You begin to notice that not every invitation is a blessing, not every opportunity is meant for you, and not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your life. That clarity is what unlocks focus, which in turn unlocks impact. Saying no doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you responsible. It means you've chosen to lead your life, not just react to it. It means you are aware of the energy exchange happening in every interaction and have decided to stop giving away what is sacred in return for what is convenient. Boundaries are not a sign of distance. They are a sign of respect. Respect for yourself and eventually, respect from others who learn to engage with you in healthier, more intentional ways. When you stop fearing the word no, you start using it as a guide. It becomes a filter, not a fence. It becomes the difference between emotional chaos and spiritual order. When you can say no without over-explaining, apologizing, or shrinking back, that's when you know you've stepped into your power, not through aggression, but through alignment. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you finally understand you have nothing to prove. The need to please others is one of the most invisible forms of self-abandonment. It hides behind smiles, polite nods, and fake agreements. People-pleasing is not kindness. It's a silent contract we sign with the world that says, "I'll keep you comfortable if you validate my existence." But what many never realize is that this constant need to say yes, to be liked, to be accepted, to avoid conflict, this disease to please, slowly erodes your inner strength. You become a reflection of others' expectations instead of your own truth. And before you know it, you're living someone else's life, carrying someone else's weight, and feeling emptier by the day. The root of people-pleasing is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being disliked, fear of being seen as difficult. But the more you avoid those fears, the more you betray your own voice. You teach yourself that your needs don't matter as much as someone else's comfort. You become a master of silencing your desires and swallowing your boundaries just to avoid discomfort. And it's not always obvious. It shows up in small ways. You say yes to a request when every fiber of you is screaming no. You agree to go places, do favors, participate in things that drain you, not because you want to, but because you're terrified of what might happen if you say no. That's not peace. That's internal suffocation. And the more you do it, the more you lose touch with your own identity. You become a version of yourself that is easy to be around but hard to live with. You go along to get along, but deep down you're carrying invisible weight, resentment, exhaustion, frustration. It builds quietly, and it doesn't just stay in the moment where the boundary was crossed. It lingers, it infects how you see yourself. You begin to feel weak, powerless, unseen. You start to question your own worth because you've placed it in the hands of others for too long. Healing from the disease to please begins with recognizing that your value is not determined by how well you accommodate others. Your value is not in your sacrifices, it's in your sovereignty. You don't have to overextend yourself to be loved. You don't have to be everything to everyone. The truth is, people will still find fault with you even when you give them your best. So what exactly are you sacrificing your well-being for? Approval is a moving target. You could bend backwards, lower your standards, stay silent, and still not be enough for the wrong people. That's why the freedom begins when you decide that you are no longer available for that dynamic. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a balanced one. When you stop agreeing out of guilt, you start aligning with integrity. You begin to operate from truth instead of tension. And there's nothing more magnetic than a person who knows where they stand, not with ego, but with clarity. You begin to make decisions not because you're scared to upset others, but because you're committed to honoring yourself. And in that moment, you reclaim parts of yourself you didn't even realize you had lost. The disease to please keeps people stuck in toxic cycles. They become the emotional caretakers in every room. They carry burdens that aren't theirs. They feel responsible for everyone's feelings, but here's the truth. You are not responsible for how someone feels about your boundary. Their discomfort is not your emergency. Their disapproval is not your failure. If someone is only comfortable when you're uncomfortable, that's not a relationship, that's control, and your no is what breaks the pattern. Boundaries are not about being cruel, they are about being clear. They teach others how to treat you, and more importantly, they remind you of how you deserve to be treated. And sometimes the people who benefited from your silence will be the loudest when you begin to speak up. But that noise is temporary. The peace that follows your truth is permanent. Every time you choose to say no instead of giving in, you send a signal to your subconscious that you are safe with yourself, that you will protect your own needs, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you approval. This transformation doesn't require anger or bitterness. It requires awareness. You begin to look at your people, pleasing not as a personality trait, but as a survival mechanism that no longer serves the life you're building. You outgrow it. You begin to trust that your relationships won't collapse just because you said no. You start choosing connections where love doesn't depend on sacrifice, and in doing that, you stop living for applause and start living in alignment. It's not about becoming selfish, it's about becoming whole. You can be kind and still have boundaries. You can be compassionate and still say no. You can love others and still choose yourself. In fact, the most authentic love begins with truth. And the truth is, the version of you who always says yes is tired, overworked, overlooked, and undernurtured. It's time to let that version rest. It's time to step into a chapter where your needs matter just as much as anyone else's, and where saying no is not a betrayal. It's a return to yourself. Most people go through life overwhelmed, not because they lack time, but because they've filled their lives with things that don't actually belong to them. They say yes to every invitation, opportunity, task, and distraction without considering the long-term cost. And slowly, their lives become cluttered with commitments, responsibilities, and energy, draining situations that keep them stuck. The truth is, your life cannot grow until you start removing what no longer aligns with your purpose. Every time you say no to something that feels heavy or misaligned, you are creating space for what's meaningful, intentional, and transformative. No is not a rejection of life. It is the opening of a new path. We tend to think that success comes from saying yes to more hustle, more work, more connections, more output. But real success, real peace, and real freedom come from subtracting, from choosing less but with more intention, from doing fewer things but doing them with deeper presence. This is where your power begins. Not in your ability to carry everything, but in your willingness to release what isn't yours to carry, because what you tolerate becomes what you attract. If you keep tolerating clutter, mental, emotional, or physical, you will keep inviting more of it into your life. It's easy to get caught up in the momentum of saying yes. You say yes once, and it feels like the right thing to do. You say it again, and it becomes a habit. Before long, you're drowning in commitments that have nothing to do with your vision. You're waking up to days that don't excite you, surrounded by people who don't inspire you, and tied to goals that don't even belong to you. But it all started with a series of yeses that should have been no. And until you become aware of that pattern, you will keep building a life that looks full but feels empty. Your no is a sacred filter. It removes the noise so that the signal can come through. It clears the emotional bandwidth so you can tune into your intuition, because the truth is, alignment requires space, clarity requires silence. Purpose needs room to breathe. When your life is packed with distractions, obligations, and toxic attachments, your inner guidance gets drowned out. You can't hear the whisper of your calling when you're busy attending to everyone else's urgency. Most people don't need a longer to-do list. They need a stronger stop-doing list. They need to look at their lives and ask, what am I doing just to avoid guilt? What am I carrying because I'm afraid to disappoint someone? What have I agreed to out of fear instead of faith? That inventory is where transformation begins, because once you identify what's weighing you down, you can begin the process of consciously releasing it. And when you do, what remains is your real life. The life that was waiting for you beneath all the noise. Saying no is an act of creation. It's the starting point of something new. You cannot say yes to what you truly want until you've said no to what you don't. You cannot welcome the right energy, the right opportunities, the right people until you've made space by letting go of what's wrong. This is why the word no is not a wall, it's a doorway. It's a powerful decision that signals to the universe that you are ready for what's next, not because you're chasing it, but because you've finally made room for it. There's something deeply liberating about learning to say no without apology. No explanation, no justification, just a simple, firm decision rooted in self-respect, and it's not because you think you're better than anyone. It's because you finally understand the value of your time, your energy, your peace. You no longer entertain chaos just to avoid confrontation. You no longer dilute your worth just to be agreeable. You choose what nourishes your spirit, even if it means disappointing others. Because every time you say yes to something that doesn't align with you, you're abandoning a piece of yourself, and the longer you keep doing that, the further you drift from your purpose. Real growth isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's about learning that discipline isn't just about grinding harder, it's about protecting your space from what's unnecessary. Your no becomes the gatekeeper of your future. It tells the world that you're no longer available for what drains you. It tells your mind that you're serious about change, and it tells your soul that you're finally listening. When you start saying no to things that once controlled you, people's opinions, obligations that feel heavy, invitations that don't excite you, you reclaim your time and energy, and with that reclaimed energy, you can build. You can focus, you can thrive. You start seeing life not as something to survive, but something to shape, something to design, something to live fully and on purpose. And all of it starts with the courage to say no to what no longer fits and yes to what finally does. Most people live their lives on autopilot, reacting to what's in front of them rather than choosing what's truly for them. They say yes out of habit, not alignment. They compromise out of fear, not clarity. And they continue down paths that no longer serve them because somewhere along the line, they were taught that being agreeable was safer than being authentic. But the truth is, nothing changes until you change what you tolerate. Your destiny is not something you stumble upon, it's something you activate, and the first step toward activation is choosing yourself, not once, not occasionally, but consistently, choosing yourself when it's hard, choosing yourself when others don't understand, choosing yourself even when the noise around you screams that you shouldn't. That's when the shift happens. That's when your life begins to reflect your power instead of your patterns. Most people are terrified of saying no because they think it means losing love, losing opportunity, or losing approval. But what's truly being lost in the constant yes is your identity. You can't be everything to everyone and still expect to stay rooted in your truth. Every time you say yes to avoid guilt, you bury a part of your intuition. Every time you say yes out of fear, you feed a version of yourself that was built for survival, not expansion. And the more you feed that version, the further you drift from the one who's capable of living with intention, confidence, and peace. The version of you that chooses yourself is the version that changes everything. When you begin to say no to fear, to manipulation, to guilt, to pressure, when you begin to say no to settling, to shrinking, to self-doubt, you start walking a different path. You move from passive acceptance to active creation. You stop asking permission and start making decisions. You stop hoping someone else will see your worth and start embodying it in every step you take. This isn't about becoming hardened or disconnected. It's about becoming aligned and deliberate, because you finally realize that your destiny is too important to keep compromising for comfort. The moment you say no to who you used to be, you give yourself permission to become who you were meant to be. You start rewriting the story. You stop playing small to protect others' feelings. You stop dimming your light so someone else doesn't feel uncomfortable. You begin to take up space, not with arrogance, but with certainty. Certainty that your time is valuable, certainty that your energy is sacred, certainty that your life is not a random sequence of events, but a canvas waiting for your full expression. And that expression cannot happen when you are stuck in the cycle of performing for validation. People often wait for external change before they take internal action. They wait for the perfect timing, the right support, the obvious sign. But the truth is, transformation begins the moment you make a different choice. The moment you say no to the pattern you've been stuck in. The moment you refuse to carry the same emotional baggage into another season. That's when everything starts to shift. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And that internal shift is what rearranges everything around you. Life begins to respond differently when you start showing up with intention rather than obligation. Your no sends a message, not just to others, but to yourself. It tells your subconscious that you are no longer willing to live in delay, denial, or depletion. It signals a new standard, a new mindset, a new level of self-respect, and from that place, you start attracting differently. You stop chasing what's not meant for you. You stop tolerating half-hearted relationships. You stop overextending for the sake of being liked. You create a new rhythm, one where your decisions are based on alignment, not approval. One where you're not living from old wounds, but from renewed vision. Choosing yourself isn't about being alone. It's about becoming whole. It's about realizing that your destiny is shaped not by how many people support you, but by how deeply you support yourself. When you choose yourself, you become unstoppable, not because you never fall, but because you finally know how to stand back up on your own terms. You start to trust your voice. You start to honor your boundaries. You start to believe that you are enough without having to overgive, overexplain, or overcompensate. That belief is what begins to alter the course of your life, not overnight, but with every consistent decision rooted in self-honor. Every great transformation is preceded by a moment of courage, a moment where you stop settling and start choosing. That moment often looks like a quiet no. A no to what drains you, no to what distracts you, no to what no longer fits the future you're stepping into. That no may feel small, but it's a turning point. It's the crack in the old version of yourself. It's the beginning of a new direction. It's the space where your future begins to breathe. And in that space, your real destiny, one of depth, freedom, and fulfillment, starts to unfold because you finally chose not just what felt safe, but what felt right. You chose yourself, and that choice changes everything.